Andy Griffith theme playing once again, so that means it's time for our weekly wildlife conversation here on the weekend with Anthony Opperman. Welcome back in, as always, our guest for this segment from the Virginia Department of Game and Inland Fisheries, Chris Dunnavant. And Chris, I don't think we've ever explained why the Andy Griffith theme plays leading into this segment.
Yes, it was. We have not, and it's really an interesting thing. What happened? Do you want me to tell it, or?
Absolutely, you're the star.
It was our one of our initial meetings that we had with Lee Walker, just to talk about. You were presenting. You had presented it to me, your idea, but we needed to get approval above me and get their thoughts. And so we were meeting with Lee Walker. You were discussing the show. We were talking about it, talking about ideas, and we were getting ready to leave, saying our goodbyes and shaking hands, and then Lee's phone rang, and that is Lee's ringtone. And when you heard that, you said, I think I just found the theme song for the show. I mean, it's just serendipitous, just the timing was perfect.
Well, and as Lee said, every time you hear that theme song, you do think about going fishing.
Absolutely. You have that picture of, the two of them walking down that road, going to the pond and fishing, and that's definitely what comes to mind.
Well, speaking of going fishing, let's talk about fishing. We're right at the end of February, about to go into March, and obviously the weather has felt a little bit like spring one day and a little bit like winter the next. It's kind of been odd here at the end of February, the way that has gone. But talk about what's in season right now in terms of going out and fishing. And, to this point, we really haven't had a cold snap yet, and it really hasn't felt too much like winter. But the reality is, spring's right around the corner. It
is, and it's fast approaching. March is going to be here, and, we're full into spring. But right now, if you're a bass angler, probably the top thing to do is to think about fishing with jerkbaits. And, it sounds like a funny name, a jerkbait. You can be a nice guy and still fish with a jerkbait. But a jerkbait is, it's just a great, even though spring is coming, the water's still cold. And jerkbait fishing is a great late winter, early spring, pre-spawn technique. And what a jerkbait is, it's a long, slender bait, typically 2-3 treble hooks on it, a small bill, but they also make them with a deep bill. But it is, and this time of year you want a suspending jerkbait. Make sure if you're going to go buy one, if you don't own one, or if you have a selection, use your suspending jerkbaits. And what you do with the jerkbait, you cast it out, and you reel it down a little bit, but then you twitch it, and it makes some erratic twitches, and then you let it pause. Probably the biggest key to jerkbait fishing is the pause. And you can change your cadence. You can twitch it hard, twitch it gently. You can pull it. I like, when it's really cold weather, I like just to pull the jerkbait slowly, let it pause for a while. But probably one of the biggest keys is length of pause. Some days, they just need it paused for a second or less. Other days, you might pause it for 5-10 seconds, which is an eternity. But that's probably the biggest draw for the jerkbait, is it looks like an injured or a real vulnerable prey. And so when it pauses and sits there and just kind of suspends in the water, what an easy meal. And this time of year, it is a great, the fish aren't as active, the water's still cold, and it's just an easy target. So it makes for a great fishing lure.
Chris Dunnavant from the Virginia Department of Game and Inland Fisheries, a weekly wildlife conversation here on the weekend with Anthony Opperman. And Chris, not just great opportunities for the jerkbait with the bass, but also maybe an opportunity to catch the big one, huh?
It is. It is an amazing time of year to catch big fish. The jerkbait is definitely one of my top techniques this time of year for catching big monster bass. But just this time of year, the cold weather, it's just the fish they're feeding up. They've been feeding. They're fat from the wintertime. They've been, their metabolism is lower. They just seem, the fish, when you catch them this time of year, they're thicker, they're healthy. And also the big females, the eggs are forming, and so they're getting that kind of fat, that weight built on. And so this is the best time of year to catch big fish. And I think if you were to say, where is the number one place for you to go to catch a big bass or even a big crappie this time of year, I would say a pond. It is just a fantastic place to go fishing this time of year. One, because it's a smaller body of water, so you eliminate the time spent of finding fish, and two, you know, other bodies of water you can catch big ones, but they may be more scattered out. You got to run around a lot to find them. Whereas in a pond, they're all right there. You have opportunities to catch multiple big fish, maybe better than another place. But also because of their size, they warm up faster. So if you have a little warming trend or even just a mild day, they're going to warm up faster than a big body of water. And so you can have really nice peaks and prime fishing with just these little windows of time that we might get, although we've had this year a mild winter. But you can get little windows of nice peaks of warm weather, and the pond fishing can really get hot really fast. It's a great time of year to catch big fish.
How do you think the weather this winter has affected fishing? And specifically weeks where, again, it can be 60 degrees one day, and then 2 days later, you've got snow on the ground, and it barely gets to 40 degrees, if that. I mean, how does that affect fishing? Is it good for fishing? Is it bad for fishing? Is it just kind of in between? Where does that go?
You know, those wild swings, I think, do affect fish. Probably that immediate weather affects fish more than anything else. You know, there are other factors, but that what's happening in the weather that day, and I have found that up and down swings can get the fish kind of in a foul mood because, you know, they're just subject to their environment. They're cold-blooded creatures, and so whatever the barometric pressure's doing, the temperature's doing, they're greatly influenced. I mean, you talk to somebody that has an injury or, you know, they broke a bone once, and, you know, they know when a cold front's coming in. That starts hurting. Well, I think the fish really get impacted by that too. And so that is a factor. But one thing good about this time of year is that I think is a huge factor, that fish, whatever the weather will do, that might affect them that day. But in the grand scheme, I really believe fish are influenced by length of day. And so there are cues taking place right now as the days get longer and longer each day. I mean, you probably notice, everybody notices as they drive home from work each day, it's a little brighter, you know, than it was the day before or the week before. So the fish, I think, are really cued into that. So they are in the mindset of, it's the time of year, you know, it's warming up. I'm going to be looking ahead to feed. They know instinctively spawning's coming. They're going to be feeding up, preparing for that time of year. And so, yeah, a bad weather day might come along and mess things up, but overall, the fish have a mindset of heading towards the bank, eating, feeding, and getting ready for that. So they're vulnerable.
They call Cesar Millan the dog whisperer. We'll call Chris Dunnavant the fish whisperer, taking you inside the mindset of a fish through these up and down weather swings that we've been having as of late.
Isn't that amazing? I can do that.
Chris Dunnavant for the Virginia Department of Game and Inland Fisheries. Weekly wildlife conversation here on the weekend with Anthony Opperman. And Chris, before this conversation completely goes south, what are some other options in terms of baits this time of year?
Yeah, you know, the jerkbait is definitely a good bait. I would say definitely want to use a jig and pig or a jig and plastic trailer. It's got to be one of the top choices for big fish. You know, a spinner bait is good. You know, I would say like a jerkbait, you want, you know, stained to clear water. If the water is heavily stained or muddy, you know, go to a spinner bait instead of a jerkbait. So those are some good techniques. Maybe a big, deeper crankbait that's just slow moving. But, you know, you talked about some of those up and down weather days and the fish can be, you know, kind of in a foul mood. Well, there's one thing you can do that is almost a guarantee. Not perfect, but when all else fails, when all baits fail, live bait during cold weather can be a really great option. You know, I'm an artificial lures angler, but there are times during the wintertime that I just enjoy going to the tackle shop, buying some minnows, and fishing with live bait. And it can be some really fun action. I've tested it. You can be casting to an area with artificial lures, and you maybe catch one or two, but then you throw some minnows out over there, and it's like, just it comes alive. And, you know, so wintertime, it can be a really good opportunity to fish with live bait. And, you know, for crappie, of course, you can use small and medium minnows. But, you know, and I will sometimes use small and medium minnows for bass. but it is a great time of year to buy some jumbo minnows. Years ago when I worked at Green Top, this time of year, you would see those anglers come in, and they'd say, a dozen jumbo minnows, and you know what they were doing. They were going to go to a pond, and they were going to have those jumbo minnows out, and they weren't going to catch a whole bunch of fish that day, but guaranteed they were going to have a chance of catching a pretty big fish, maybe even a trophy. So, a minnow below a float, especially if it's a warming day. Also an option is to just pinch a little split shot above it and troll it without a float. A free lining, in that method, but it can be very effective. But I also like sometimes to use a Kale-style hook that has a weed guard on it, because a lot of times these ponds have a lot of cover in them, and so to help you get through getting snagged all the time. And those minnows too, they'll swim up in stuff. They like cover just like every other fish, and also I think they kind of know that they're a pretty good target. They're all of a sudden in this, they were in a little aquarium, a little tank, and now they're in this big body of water. They see a tree in the water or a stump, they're going to go try to nose in a crevice of it to hide for safety. So a weedless hook is a good option for sure.
Chris Dunnavant for the Virginia Department of Game and Inland Fisheries. Getting ready to bring this wildlife segment to a close, but Chris, before we do, definitely a lot of things coming up for you guys with the DGF and for you personally. Busy calendar of events.
Yeah, it is. This is a really busy time of year for DGIF, for me. We've got the Spring Fishing Classic at Bass Pro Shops is underway, and we're going to have a booth there on the weekend of March 3rd and 4th. And so please come by and say hello. Love to see you. And but they've got all kinds of events. Go to their website. They've got great sales. They've got pros that are coming into town to do seminars. They've got kids' activities and some great deals, too. You can come in and trade in an old rod or an old reel and get a discount on a new one. It's a good deal, really good opportunity to upgrade some of your stuff. Also, we've got the National Archery in the Schools tournament, the state tournament. 500-plus kids coming to compete and with an archery tournament. It is amazing. It's a full day. It is a where is this out day, but it is exciting to see all these kids coming from all over the state to compete for the title of a state champion. They then get to go on and compete in the national championship. And it's a great event, National Archery in the Schools program. It's a phenomenal event in Virginia.
Chris will be participating in that, not actually being the archer, but will be at that event today. And while he's there, I'm sure you'll see him checking that iPhone to see what's going on at the Bassmaster Classic. Chris, looking forward to breaking down the results of that on our show next week.
Sounds good, Anthony. Thank you very much.
Get Chris Dunnavant for the Virginia Department of Game and Inland Fisheries, a weekly wildlife conversation here on the weekend with Anthony Opperman. Stay tuned. Game plan for the weekend coming up.
The show is almost over, but the weekend is just getting started. More of The Weekend with Anthony Opperman is next on Sports Radio 910.